Oh, it is recording. Hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Claire Mitchell. Welcome, everyone, as we are getting started for our webinar today. I have an icebreaker question for everybody, and you can put this in the chat box. My icebreaker for this month is, what is your favorite Florida native tree? And I'm going to get started. Okay, I got mine. Mine is Chickasaw plum, and that is native to this region. And it is flowering out right now, and it's gorgeous little white flowers, and all of the pollinators are loving it. And I also, in the summer, I make like a little like plum syrup out of the plums. So that is my favorite tree. Okay, let's see what everybody else is saying. Okay, so when I said this, I was like, oh, everyone's just going to say live oak, but you guys are proving me wrong. So we have, oh man, lignum vitae. What is that, Darlene? I'm not the horticulturist here. Okay, we got sage plants. Beautiful. That's not a tree though, Carol. Florida red maple. Good one. Joe Wood. What is yours, Katie? What's your favorite tree?
Um, I'm gonna say the Florida torreya. It's a critically endangered
Oh,
conifer that is existing in just a small, narrow region in the Apalachicola area.
that's awesome.
Mhm.
Have you visited up there?
I have actually.
Yeah.
I work in mycology lab, and so we were looking for a particular fungus that is also impacting that tree. So yeah, I went rooting around all over the place there.
That's
It was
awesome.
a great time, but yeah, unfortunately, those trees are suffering greatly from multiple fungal pathogens.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Hmm.
Okay, well, we also have some black cherry. We have magnolias. Someone else likes a Chickasaw plum as well. A paradise tree. I've never heard of that one, but see, I only know North Florida plants. So we have a native strangler fig. Oh, cool. And then berry, just saw terrarium trees in Mariana recently. We love them. Fringe tree. Um, Oh, Katie, do you have a photo of that tree? We can look one up. Kaylee will look up a picture of the torreya and put it in here. Yeah, it's endemic to Florida, correct? And it only
Hmm.
lives on like in the on the banks of like the Apalachicola River west of Tallahassee.
Hmm.
And it is critically endangered because everyone cut it down for shingles and fences. So
Yeah.
now we have like no more. So that's cool. Okay. See, someone likes the live oak. I think live oak is probably actually my favorite, and Chickasaw plum is close second though. Okay. Well, guys, I think we are getting it started. It's 11:04, and we are going to go ahead and start this webinar. Thank you for everyone who contributed to the icebreaker. So, hello, welcome. My name is Claire Mitchell, and this is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program's Homeowner Webinar Series, and this is a series given on every third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. So, I'm Claire Mitchell. I'm the statewide education manager. And today we have Katy Deitz, who's going to be speaking with us about conserving deadwood in urban green spaces. So for everybody who's here, your microphones have been muted. And if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box. And the chat box is going to be closed, and we'll answer all of the Q&As answer all of our questions at the end of the presentation. So please stick around until the end, and we have an exit survey, and it helps give us an idea what kind of programming you'd like to see and what we're doing right, and what we could improve. Our next webinar will be March 17th at 11 a.m. and we'll be joined by Heather Calaman. She is a FFL horticulture agent in Orange County, and she's going to be talking to us about beneficial insects. So today we're talking with Katy Deitz. She's a PhD candidate in plant pathology at UF, where her research focuses on tree health, wood decay, fungi, and forest pathology, and she holds a master's in science in forest resources and conservation from UF and is the lead author of the Field Guide to Wood Decay Fungi on Florida Trees. And she supports arborists and land managers statewide. So, Katy, thank you so much for joining us and take it away.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you for having me today. I'm really happy to be here and to talk to you about this really awesome conservation campaign that we are doing at the University of Florida, the NeighborWOOD Watch, Deadwood Conservation and Urban Green Spaces. Oh, there we go. Okay. So first, I just have to shout out the team. This was a collaboration between many people. I could not be doing this solely on my own. So just have to give a shout out to Dr. Yuri Holzer. He's our forest entomologist at the University of Florida. Ben Schwartz shot all of our videos I will talk about a little bit later for our campaign. Avery Kulbeda, she did our illustrations, including our lovely logo that was on the home presentation slide, as well as all the illustrations you see here. Dr. Matt Smith, he is our mycologist at the University of Florida and the curator of the fungal herbarium. Lauren Nigri, she designed our website and got that up and running. And me, of course, I'm here to present and talk to you about this campaign. So for today, what we're going to talk about is why we should care about deadwood, current attitudes towards deadwood, the saprozoic food web, the formation of the NeighborWOOD Watch, and some results so far. So when I say the word deadwood, perhaps you think of some images such as these, kind of messy, woody debris on the forest floor. Um, Perhaps you think of some heart rot, as you can see on this trunk on the right. The entire center has been completely hollowed out by wood decay fungi. Or being in Florida, since we have hurricanes, perhaps you think of something like this. Unfortunately for my neighbor, this was their house. They had a tree that was uprooted, a dead tree that was uprooted and fell onto their home. Luckily, there was pretty minor damage, and nobody was hurt. But perhaps when you think of deadwood, those are some of the images that come to mind. But deadwood, it's really a misnomer because it really isn't dead. It's actually teeming with life, such as fungi, lizards, beetles, woodpeckers and other birds, raccoons and other mammals, mosses, and lichens. So there's all these organisms that can be found on dead wood. Now, when we think about forest conservation, perhaps we think about these nice, serene, lush landscapes, just really tranquil environments where we can find peace and enjoy being in. But we might think less about including images of whole dead trees in the landscape. Perhaps we don't think about disturbances and fractured trees falling over and splitting as a result of those disturbances. And even less so, we probably don't think about including whole stands of dead trees that have been affected by disease. In the case of these trees here, these are red bays that are in the Laraceae family. These have been impacted by laurel wilt. So this is a fungal disease that causes vascular wilt, collapse of the vascular system in the tree, and it's vectored by an invasive ambrosia beetle. But this is why we need to expand our conversations so tree cover in urban community areas of the United States is on the decline at a rate of about 36 million trees per year due to development, climate change, and invasive species. And here in Florida, I'm sure we all are witnessing the amount of development, the amount of trees that are being cleared. So trees are not only being cut down, but they're being removed as well. So we need to expand our conversations to not only talk about conservation, but also degradation. So what do I mean by degradation? So, forest degradation, this is the loss of key ecological structures such as dying trees and deadwood, even in the absence of deforestation. So, this is driven by a lack of public awareness about the function of deadwood and the removal of dead and dying trees. So, even in the absence of deforestation, we've probably all seen this image of, perhaps we had a disturbance or heavy windstorm, or, even a light windstorm sometimes causes decaying branches to fall. And what do we usually do with that in our urban landscapes? Well, it's seen as debris, as trash. We collect it, we put it at the end of our driveway, and we wait for it to be taken away. So that's what I mean by degradation, even in the absence of cutting down trees. So, what we want to do is we want to give context to the ecological benefit of deadwood, because if we don't know what the purpose is, again, we're just seeing it as debris, we're seeing it as waste, something that's not supposed to be there. We know that living trees provide food, clean air and water, temperature regulation, they support pollinators. So, we need to do the same thing and give context to the ecological benefit of deadwood. So this is a overly complicated, a lot going on in this diagram, but this is a diagram of the saprozoic food web. So these are organisms that are existing on wood, and you can see there's a lot of interactions going on here. So we have woody material at the base. This can support structural wood decayers. So these are wood decay fungi that break down components of the wood. It can support mycorrhiza, saprotrophs. So these are fungi that form positive associations with plants and help them grow by exchanging nutrients. And then those fungi can also support fungivores. So animals like lizards and whatnot that feed on fungi, scavengers, and then that layer can support predatory arthropods, and you can kind of see how this structure is being displayed. This is kind of complicated and not very pleasing to look at, so let's look at it like this. Now, I know the text is very hard to read, but don't worry about that. I just want you to look at this image, and this is what the previous diagram was basically showing. We have a log that has fallen over. We have mosses that are growing because dead wood can retain a lot of moisture. So you have mosses there that help promote seedling growth. You have wood decay fungi that are growing, and squirrels and insects that are feeding on the fungi, birds that can feed on the insects. We can see that there's snakes finding habitat in that fallen log, as well as turtles and toads underneath it, and foxes finding homes in the cavities. So there's a lot of interactions going on here, and you can see that there's a lot of life going on this, dead piece of wood. So wood inhabitants, they are primarily fungi and insects. And, historically, maybe these things haven't had the best association. Fungi, there's been this kind of negative connotation historically as something toxic. And I'm sure if you've, watched the news lately and you hear about people foraging for mushrooms, especially in California, there's been a lot of consumption of toxic mushrooms on accident. And so, there's kind of been this negative connotation with fungi historically, and insects. We obviously don't want them in our homes, crawling on us, whatnot. But most of the fungi on deadwood are wood decomposers. And so if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be here, and we would just be completely buried in woody biomass. Life just wouldn't exist without these wood decomposers. So I'm going to highlight just a couple of nice wood decay fungi that maybe you can see when you're out walking in the woods. So one of these is Laetoporus sulphureus, commonly called chicken of the woods. Now, this causes it can create a heartwood rot. Here in the southeast, it's more common on hardwoods, but they can also exist on conifers as well. And they create this heartwood rot, so they're rotting the center of the tree, and then that can create a great nesting site for other animals. I haven't personally tried it, but it's a delicious edible. People say the texture is much like chicken, hence the common name. And this causes a brown rot decay. You can see in this image on the bottom that the it's also called cubical brown rot. So you can see that the wood has been rotted such that it's forming like little squares, little cubes. And that brown rot really helps to retain moisture. Eventually, this, if this was still in the natural area, it would completely break down and you would just see those brown cubes that, again, helps retain moisture in the soil and eventually gets fully decomposed into soil for plants to grow. Wood ear fungi is another great wood decay fungi. This just exists on the dead part of the tree and decomposes the dead part, so it will not actively decay living tissue on the tree. You can see maybe why it got its name wood ear fungi. It looks like little earlobes on the tree. This is also edible. I've actually had this before. It's very commonly found in the environment, and people have made candy out of it. But it's also really common in Asian cuisine. I've had it in stir fries before, and gives a really nice jelly texture to a meal. Um, with that being said, talking about edible fungi, I have to emphasize that you should never eat any mushroom in the forest that you forage unless you are 1000% sure. Even the most seasoned mushroom foragers can make a mistake, and it's really imperative that you're 100% sure before you eat any really any edible plant or edible fungus in the forest. So, continuing to talk about wood inhabitants, ambrosia beetles are really, they rely on wood to complete their life cycle. So, ambrosia beetles, if you aren't familiar, these are tiny little beetles that farm for fungus gardens in the living sapwood to feed their offspring. And some of you may have heard of bark beetles and ambrosia beetles, and people are worried that these are attacking living trees and killing them, but these beetles, they really only find their home in trees that are stressed or already dying. So there's two species of bark beetles that actually attack living pine trees, but there are no beetles that are that's not their common mode. They're usually attacking stressed and dying trees. So these beetles, they carry these fungal propagules, they fly to a tree, they burrow in, and they basically plant this fungus in the tree. And you can see in this image some larvae that they're feeding on those fuzzy fungi in there. So also very important for these organisms to be in wood. All right, so deadwood is really important for seedling regeneration. I kind of touched on that earlier, and I wanted to highlight some specifics. So there's more sunlight availability for seedlings if, as you can see in this image here, if they're landing in there, because it elevates those seedlings above the forest floor. So there's reduced competition from understory plants compared to the soil. and it can protect seedlings from being just completely buried in heavy leaf litter. Deadwood creates stable moisture levels, so decaying wood retains the water and releases slowly during the dry periods. And it's really important for drought sensitive seedlings. So here in Florida, we have had not a lot of rain. This past wet season was very, very dry. But walking out in the forest, I could always observe wood decay fungi growing on fallen logs because of that high moisture retention. There's also fewer pathogens compared to the soil, which can harbor seed pathogens, damping off fungi, and root rot organisms. And there's better drainage and less exposure to soil-borne pathogens. And again, there's less root competition than the forest floor. So deadwood, really important for new seedling establishment. And if you're interested, you can read more about this. I highlighted this review at the bottom, The Effects of Deadwood on Tree Regeneration and Microsites, a systematic review. This just came out last year. And so a really great review that just talks about everything I just highlighted. So also this deadwood is an important germination substrate for ectomycorrhizal plants. So ectomycorrhizal fungi, these are fungi that form positive mutual associations with plants. So you can kind of see in the diagram here to the left, there's a mushroom and it basically colonizes the roots of the plant, and the mushroom is going to get sugars from the plant, and the plant is going to get potassium, nitrogen from the fungi. So deadwood is really important for the establishment of those ectomycorrhizal fungi because they can use deadwood as a nutrient source. So while they're kind of waiting around for a host plant to be available, they can just live on that deadwood and get nutrients from the deadwood. And so that deadwood facilitates the fungal network expansion. And on the image on the right, you can kind of see the succession of like a living tree to dying to dead to then becoming like heavily degraded. So ectomycorrhizal fungi, they like to be in those more heavily degraded, heavily moderately decayed wood. So it's going to be more in like number 5 and number 6 on the top and number 3 and number 4 on the bottom. Deadwood is also really important for habitat, as we saw in that larger diagram in the beginning of the presentation. So vertebrates and invertebrates, they use snags, logs, and cavities for breeding and habitat. So snags, if you're not familiar, that's a term that's often used to describe a whole dead standing tree, like the illustration on the very left. I've also heard people refer to snags as the image to the right as well, which is like a kind of topped off tree. They also can be referred to as wildlife poles for obvious reasons. You have birds and other animals that are finding shelter and habitat on those trees. So again, without this context, deadwood is just seen as debris. So this is a paper, Public Visual Preferences for Deadwood in Natural Boreal Forests, the Effects of Added Information. And this was a study done in Europe that surveyed people that were walking through natural boreal forests. And before they knew the context and the ecological significance of the deadwood, they never considered it as part of the forest. They didn't really like to view it there. Even in a natural area in which it's supposed to be there, it wasn't seen favorably until they were given that context and that information. And then they surveyed them after that, and their preferences and view of the deadwood became more positive. So, can we change attitudes in the United States? Of course we can, but how do we do that? So, I'm sure we've all seen lawns that look much like this, just monocultures of grass. It almost looks like a carpet after you vacuum it. You see those lines, just pristine monocultures of grass, not a lot going on. Maybe sometimes you'll see a little bit of diversity in the lawn landscape, but at least I remember like growing up in the 90s, um, everybody wanted to have the most perfect, pristine lawn, just a carpet of grass with nothing else on it. And sorry, this graphic is supposed to be a little bit higher, but now we're seeing, in more recent years, campaigns like Kill Your Lawn, and Advocation. This is a web page from the Florida Native Plant Society giving information on how to grow natives, how to landscape with native plants. Again, giving that context as to what is the importance of integrating native plants into your landscape. So we can take a yard like this that looks quite boring, and I mean, the grass doesn't even look that great, and we can transform it with native plants into this really lush, biodiverse landscape. So again, here's another yard that's kind of bland looking, and it's got all this ecological diversity by incorporating native plants. So maybe we can take something like this, just kind of a boring old stump, even though I love I love wood decay fungi. So for me, I appreciate just the boring old stump, but maybe we can give it intentionality. So the art of stumpery. You can find this on Wikipedia, this article, but it's a garden feature similar to a rockery, but made from parts of dead trees. So in the image on the left, this is from a garden in France, I believe, in which they have bordered their gardens with all of this dead wood. And the image on the top right, this is just a structure that has a lot of dead wood incorporated, but you can see that there is a sign there, and it's giving it intentionality and showing this is supposed to be here, and here are the benefits of this installation being here. So again, like let's give it intentionality. So the image on the left, this is from one of our neighbors that's joined the NeighborWOOD Watch. And you can see they have some plants, but then they have just this fallen log that might look kind of like it's just an afterthought. But she has highlighted it with one of our NeighborWOOD Watch wooden plaques and shown, again, this is supposed to be here. Another neighbor sent this picture in, I believe from Canada, and you can see that the stump, she has created a garden bed around it and highlighted it with all these beautiful plants and even added a little birdhouse. Again, just giving it that intentionality and showing this is supposed to be here. I want this to be here. And it looks really nice. So, can we develop a network to spread the word and encourage deadwood retention in our urban landscapes? So, for our NeighborWOOD Watch campaign, we had 3 aims. Aim 1 was to produce educational videos addressing the frequently asked questions for homeowners to decide if they want to retain deadwood on their property. And we wanted to create that information set so that we aren't mandating everybody must keep deadwood on their property. We want to give homeowners and others the information to make those informed decisions for themselves, because not in all cases is it going to be the right move to retain deadwood. Aim two was to enlist a network of specialists that already advise homeowners on these types of issues, like their tree health and their gardens, to help spread the word. So we wanted a trusted network that homeowners are already working with across Florida. And then aim three was to design a website to host all these videos, links to online resources and surveys so that we can quantify the efficacy of our communication strategy. So, aim one was to create those educational resources. We created 4 episodes. The first one's on woodpeckers and birds. And we interviewed Debbie Siegel from she's the president of the Alachua Audubon Society. So she gave us a nice tour of her yard and answered some frequently asked questions about birds and deadwood. And we also interviewed some homeowners and birders as well. Episode two, this I'm biased, but this is my favorite one. This is on wood decay fungi. And so this is hosted by Dr. Matt Smith, the curator of fungi at the Florida Museum of Natural History. And he explores the fungal diversity, but also talks about some common misconceptions about wood decay fungi on trees. So learning how to maintain those fungal habitats responsibly. We also have an episode of Arborist Insights. Our presenter was John Burns, who's an ISA certified arborist at Skyfrog Tree Service. And so he's talking about what goes into making assessments on trees that maybe need to be taken down or leaving deadwood in the environment. So his expertise was awesome to have. And then finally, an episode on the Florida woods roach. So this is hosted by Yuri Holzer and Tai Young Lee, and highlighting one of the most misunderstood creatures found in deadwood habitats. So highly encourage all of you to check out these episodes that we have on our website to learn more. So aim two, this was to enlist a network of specialists that already advise homeowners on trees, on their trees and gardens to spread the word. So we chose ISA certified arborists and master gardener volunteers to help us with this. So a lot of you might be familiar with this program, or maybe you're a master gardener volunteer yourself. The Florida Master Gardener Program is an outreach program composed of UF IFAS Extension certified volunteers who are trained to provide research-based horticultural education to Florida residents. This is an awesome group of people. Again, they're interacting with homeowners a lot and helping them to make informed decisions about their gardens. So we knew this was a great group to work with. And ISA certified arborists. To obtain that credential, you have to go through a lot of training and on various topics such as tree biology, identification, selection, pruning, diagnosing trees, assessing tree risk, etc. So how it works is master gardeners and ISA certified arborists, when they're interacting with their clients and giving them some recommendations on their trees or deadwood, in those situations, they inform the client about the option of safely retaining that deadwood. And I have provided our master gardeners and ISA certified arborists with a QR code that goes directly to our website. So the homeowner can scan the QR code, takes them to their website, they can absorb all the information and materials for themselves, and then we have surveys in which they can decide to opt in and become part of the NeighborWOOD. So this is aim three. This is our website that hosts all of our educational materials and videos, as well as our surveys. So here, this is kind of just this is on our homepage and kind of briefly touches on a lot of the things that we've gone over in this webinar. And then we ask, would you be our neighbor? So if you're a homeowner and they're interested and they want to retain deadwood, we ask them that they click on our homeowner survey. It's a short 2 to 3 minute survey that just asks um, homeowners their preferences for different types of deadwood. So, would they retain a brush pile? Would they retain a stump? Would they retain a log, etc.? And then there's an opportunity if they would like to, they can provide their address, and the first 200 homeowners who complete the survey can request a free NeighborWOOD Watch plaque for their deadwood habitat to give it that intentionality. Likewise, if they are a master gardener or an arborist, they would take that survey, which basically just allows them to be counted as, hey, I'm one of the people out there that is going to be talking to my clients about retaining deadwood. So then we have frequently asked questions. So we address questions about wildfire risk, termites, beetles, and what if I have a homeowners association? Because for a lot of people, that's going to be the barrier that's going to limit them from feeling like they can retain deadwood on their property. We also have links to resources such as the Master Gardener Volunteer Program, Florida Friendly Landscape. We've linked y'all. Ask IFAS for fact sheets and EDIS documents about various issues, the Florida Forest Service, how to find an ISA certified arborist. All of these things are hosted on our website. So, how far away is safe for deadwood? So, the recommendation is 30 feet away from your home is a good barrier to keep deadwood and to minimize wildfire risk, termites, etc. So, another common question people have, will having dead trees breed termites? It will. So, termites, they're crucial decomposers. Along with wood decay fungi, they also help turn that dead wood into digestible biomass for other organisms. And the vast majority of them are colonizing the roots of the dead tree. So even if you have a stump and you grind it down, those roots remain. You're not going to be greatly minimizing your risk of subterranean termites. So what you can do to protect your residents from subterranean termites is to invest in those bait traps. So that's what we recommend. All right, touching back on the beetle question, a lot of people are worried, well, will having dead trees around bring beetles in to kill my healthy trees? They will not. So again, like I said, most bark beetles in the southeastern US are only going to be attracted to stress dying or dead trees. And there's only two species that are of real concern that attack fresh pine trees, and that's the southern pine beetle and the black turpentine beetle. And so that's not really a major concern to retaining deadwood. But again, that's why we recommend that 30 feet just to give a barrier between deadwood and your home. So what about if you live in a homeowners association? So I think that's where giving some intentionality to make it look like a feature rather than an afterthought is really important. So you can decorate it with a sign, a plaque, put a birdhouse or a flower pot. I recognize that for some homeowners associations, even making it intentional is probably still not good enough. So you could keep, if you have a log or a brush pile, excuse me, you could keep it in the backyard, not in the front yard. But this is one big reason why we want to do this campaign is to spread the word, to educate people. The more people that we can create this network with, and that's spreading the word, we can change the narrative on deadwood having a bad reputation. So if you watch the arborist video on our website, you'll actually see our ISA certified arborist John taking us around in a neighborhood in Gainesville, where I'm from. And this neighborhood has a homeowners association and they have a landscape committee. And they have decided that they want their neighborhood to be in line with Florida-friendly landscape. And they've actually designated an area that is away from structures, that they keep dead trees in the landscape, and they've topped the trees off so that if they fall, they will not impact anything. So it's definitely possible to change the narrative on deadwood and not let living in a homeowners association really impact things. But again, that's why we really are trying to get the word out about the ecological benefits so that maybe we can start changing some homeowners associations' minds. Another great example is Homegrown National Park. This is taken from their website, and they kind of talk about how to, this is with incorporating native plants, of course, but they talk about how to, kind of address some things and work with the homeowners association. So I think we can do a similar thing with deadwood. It just takes getting more people to support it. Okay, so some results so far. This was as of the end of last year, so I probably need to update my numbers, but we have over 100 arborists and master gardeners in our NeighborWOOD Watch network, and they have helped convert over 100 homeowners that have said, yes, I will retain deadwood on my property, or I'm already doing this. So I should mention, even if you're already retaining deadwood, I really encourage you to take our survey and just become counted. So I just like to highlight a couple of neighbors that have sent photos to me. If y'all have deadwood already on your properties, or you will in the future, and you want to send me a photo, I'll have my email at the end. I would love to see all the deadwood habitats that everyone has. So you can see this individual has our NeighborWOOD Watch plaque on their dead standing tree. And you can actually see in their garden beds behind the tree, they are actually landscaping and bordering with deadwood as well. Here's an image sent in from Claudia Vaughn, another one of our neighbors, and sent me this awesome picture of a woodpecker going to town on this tree, and you can see creating a cavity in there. This image I already showed earlier, but again, just showing the plaque on various types of deadwood. Okay, I think we have time for me to show this quick video from our website.
Hi, my name is Katy Deitz. I'm one of the founders of the NeighborWOOD Watch. We are a group of people who are passionate about trees and wildlife, and our goal is to advocate for the safe and responsible maintenance of deadwood in our urban landscapes. Now, we realize deadwood may sound like a strange thing to promote, but this is not some fringe movement. In Europe, many cities require dead trees to be left as habitat. And throughout the states, neighbors like you are using deadwood to promote biodiversity and beautify their communities. When a tree dies, it still has so much to offer back to the environment. Through each stage of decomposition, from topped trees to logs, from stumps to brush piles, every shape and size of deadwood can support countless organisms. In this video series, we will talk with homeowners, enthusiasts, and experts to learn about the benefits and beauty of deadwood. Listen to their perspectives, and then you can decide whether conserving deadwood on your property is right for you. We also invite you to join this movement and take our survey. By doing so, you will be joining a growing network of neighbors, and together we can make a difference. Thank you, and welcome to the NeighborWOOD.
Hi, I'm Wendy Wilbur. I'm with UF IFAS Master Gardener Volunteer Program, and I teach people about horticulture and plants. And today I'm looking at a lot of different plants, but one thing that you might notice in this landscape is this old stump. And it may look like just a dead tree to you, but to me, it's a lot more. It's a snag, and a snag is a dead tree that's left in the landscape to provide habitat for wildlife.
This was my laurel oak tree. It had severe heart rot decay, and as you can see, the entire center is completely hollow. So I can literally step inside my stump. The whole tree was around me. All it would have taken is one bad storm and it would have, boop, toppled over.
This tree had rot and was dropping branches, and I knew it was a hazardous tree. We had a hurricane coming. I was very concerned that this tree was going to fall on my house, so we had it removed. It was about 150 feet tall.
Tree removal can be really expensive. So initially I just had the tree cut down, and then I was later going to have the stump ground down. But I'm glad I didn't, because one, it saved me money, and two, it's brought a lot of biodiversity to my backyard.
When the tree company asked, do you want me to grind the stump? I said, no, please leave a little bit of this trunk so we can have a snag in the landscape that's going to provide for wildlife. And you would be surprised at the creatures that come here.
This is Tater Tot. She loves playing on the stump. Sometimes I'll find her inside the stump looking around at things. It's become a really good spot for her to hang out and investigate.
You never know what you're going to find behind the bark of a snag. But I'll tell you what I've seen. I've seen beautiful pileated woodpeckers pecking giant holes on this tree. It's always such a joy to see when I hear the knocking, and I know there's a big woodpecker out here searching for beetles and beetle larvae. And it's a real pleasure to attract those birds to the landscape.
At first, I was really disheartened at losing this big, beautiful tree. But then, as time went on, and I saw the kind of biodiversity it was adding to my backyard, I realized this is one thing I can do. Or rather, by not doing anything, by not removing the dead wood, I can contribute to biodiversity and conserve habitats that are disappearing. And so if you care about conservation, you don't have to do anything if you have dead wood, but leave it and enjoy all the biodiversity that follows.
Okay. Whoops. Okay. So just to wrap up, so how you can help, you can take our surveys on our website. You can share our flyer. I think that's going to be dropped in the chat now. So this has a QR code directly to our website. You can share our website and you can join our socials. So with that, again, I just want to thank my team. Thank you, NSF, for funding. Special thank you to our presenters in our video, and I will leave this up. So the QR code goes directly to our website. It's also up on the top if QR codes aren't your jam. We have a Facebook and an Instagram that's really, really young. I'm trying to post more on there. So if you'd like to follow or send me deadwood habitat photos, I would absolutely love that. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to email me at katydeitz@ufl.edu. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was really interesting, and a lot of very cool issues that is part of Florida Friendly Landscaping, but we don't always focus on the importance of these decomposers and the habitats that they need to survive. So I have a lot of questions here. We have, and I guess I think the thing that comes up a lot is like the potential problems that these that deadwood can bring. So can you just reemphasize that again of just like insects and fire issues and things like that? Like I know you mentioned it in the talk, but like okay, so for termites, can you just like say that one more time? Like what do we need to know about termites and then what do we need to know about fire, especially right
Yeah,
now?
of course. So yeah, the recommendation is to keep a barrier between dead wood and your house of 30 feet. So, I mean, you can imagine in some really smaller properties. I live downtown in Gainesville, so I have a really, really small property. So it's a little bit harder to maybe keep 30 feet, but that's the recommendation to, minimize wildfire risk. Also, to just have a bit of a barrier between, insects in your home. But it's also really important to, I didn't mention this, to, one way you can keep a barrier from your home and outside environment is to make sure that the outside of your home is well maintained, that, there aren't like cracks or water damage. Fungi love water. So having your house painted, I mean, I think most people have their house painted, but like making sure there's a good barrier between the outside environment. And then regarding termites, um, like even if you get rid of, let's say you have a dead tree and they cut it down to a stump and they grind that stump down, unless they're going to be removing every single dead root that is below ground, you're still going to get termites. That's where most of them live and breed, is underground on those dead roots. So that's where having subterranean bait traps is really important. Um, and then, yeah, just to highlight about beetles again, bark beetles here in the southeast, there's only two kinds of beetles that are going to attack living trees. So by having dead wood, you will have bark beetles, but they are not going to be impacting your living trees.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so we have a question here. Someone was mounting orchids on a large pine tree in the backyard, and she says she must have nicked it somehow, and unfortunately killed the tree.
Hmm.
And someone said it might be because of a beetle that attacks pine trees at certain times of the year. Is that one of the beetles that attacks living trees that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend if it's the southern pine beetle or the trying to remember what the other one was called. Let me go back real quick. Yeah. The southern pine beetle and the black turpentine beetle. Those are the two. But in regards to, creating an injury to a living tree, um, that's most uh, fungi that will, infect trees and affect living trees. They need some kind of entry point to get
Mhm.
there. So whether it's a beetle, it's probably less likely. And yeah, I probably would need more context about the tree, but
Right.
and that person, feel free to email me. But that's one way that fungi can get in is they need some kind of entry point. So creating a wound, I mean, it can
Mhm.
also be stress that you're impacting the tree. It could be completely abiotic, so like a non-living issue. Stress can, really impact the health of a tree, and having a stress tree can then, lower its defenses for other kinds of pathogens, whether that be bacteria or fungi. So yeah, I guess it's not a simple answer, but yeah, if that person wants to give me maybe more specific information or pictures or whatever, feel free to email me. I'm happy to try to help.
Yeah, I just came back from Cumberland Island and like there's these really beautiful maritime live oaks and they have to trim them a lot to just keep them out of the roads and the paths and the campsites and that's where I see the most chicken of the woods is on
Hmm.
those cuts and that really hammered it in for me that like yeah, you have to be cutting, you have to have the right arborist who's going to be trimming your trees correctly and they're not injuring your tree, because as soon as you make that cut, then that's where the disease can get in. Well, the disease being the fungus. Or
Yeah,
just like an entry point.
improper pruning for sure.
Yeah.
It impacts the tree's ability to create that wound wood, to create that barrier so that pathogens can't come in. So yeah, proper pruning is really important.
All right, we have a question that says, what do we tell people who are worried about pine trees on conservation land behind their property who want them cut down so they won't fall on their homes in hurricane season?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that, it's important to, well, I guess it depends on what targets are around. If there's pine trees that are out in the landscape and, if they fall, they're not really going to impact anything. That's one thing. But I guess if there are targets around that potentially, if that tree were to fall, they could impact it. That's where perhaps, contacting an ISA certified arborist is important. They have certifications in doing tree risk assessments. So they will look at the tree, look at the health of the tree. All trees there's no tree that's completely free risk of falling and dying, that's just not really a thing. But looking at the health of the tree, looking at the canopy, is it thinning? Does it not look healthy? Do the needles look like yellow or whatever? I would recommend, if you're worried about trees that potentially could fall and impact property, people, etc., structures, that it's a good idea to contact an arborist and get them assessed.
This is a good question. For homeowners who aren't able to retain deadwood, can mulch or other objects mimic the same benefits as deadwood?
Yeah, I think so. Mulch is just wood that's been like ground up from trees. I guess it also kind of depends on where the mulch is sourced from. I'm not super well versed in, where we can get mulch. I know, like, here in Gainesville, you can contact our utilities company, GRU, and I don't know if they still do it, but they can, they'll just bring you a whole bunch of mulch and drop it on your property. But I'm a little skeptical of that sometimes, just because I'm unsure of like what that mulch is sourced from, in terms of what kind of inoculum maybe was in the tree or whatever. But mulch is working like how deadwood is, in terms of it's really good for moisture retention for plants. And likewise, I know a lot of people use like leaf litter, like leave the leaf litter, because you've got a lot of really important insects, caterpillars, etc., that are completing their life cycle in there. But of course, you want to not have like piles of leaf litter up against your house. So yeah, I know I'm not really answering that question very well.
Well, one of the things that we promote in Florida Friendly Landscaping is to leave brush piles. And that could be good for
Mhm.
habitat and good for mostly just shelter for probably smaller animals, but
Mhm.
also nesting sites for them. And any wood that is decomposing is going to bring those decomposers in some way. So yeah, that's one thing we say too. Maybe not in your front yard, don't have your brush pile in your front
Yeah.
yard, but maybe against like a back chain link fence or something
Mhm.
is a nice thing to do as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
okay.
think like it kind of depends too on like, brush piles. Sometimes they can attract like snakes or,
That's
like
true.
mice or rodents. So I think, some people maybe they don't want that, but yeah, I would maintain that like even the smallest bit of dead wood, whether that be like, a small brush pile or like even small little logs, or, putting a border around your garden with it, like it all has significance and meaning. So you can still, contribute a lot by retaining a little. And again, like, if more people are doing this, you can imagine that it's less of a fragmented habitat if there's like all of these little pockets of deadwood around. It's kind of creating this network.
Well, I think that is a great question to end on. I didn't really think about that. Your border with your decomposing wood. That's a great idea too. To include that. I'm thinking of my neighbors, they have a border with like resurrection ferns on it.
Yeah.
Every time it rains, it's a beautiful little border around their landscaping bed. I love it. Well, I really appreciate you doing this talk today. Thanks for everybody who attended and for all your great questions. And we will see everyone next month at our next webinar.
Thank you so much.